Greg Ehrenberg. We've got Tyler producing as a big Tuesday 13-game slate ahead today. And Greg, I was thinking, man, we should bring some like Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka energy to this show. Like maybe when I'm making a point, you just start shaking your head like, I can't believe this idiot, and just start cursing under your breath. I think it would bring some intrigue here.
No? I don't like that idea.
No, not at all, huh?
No, it fucking sucks. No.
It kind of hurts, actually. Is this what DeChambeau is going to feel like when he gets on YouTube today or on social media?
No, I think he's just doing his dumb exit. Do you see like he posted? I don't even know what it was. He was doing like curls or something like that. But yeah, he had weights that were clearly too heavy for him, and he was only lifting them halfway, and just the form was weird. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's good when you do curls with your legs. You know,
it was very bizarre.
Yes, it's a whole thing there. Are you teams Koepka or DeChambeau? Who you got there?
Actually, kind of like both of them. So I'm indifferent. Like I enjoy Bryson DeChambeau trying to hit the ball 400 yards every time he swings, and I enjoy Brooks Koepka's overall disdain for Bryson DeChambeau. So to me, I'm cool with all of it.
Disdain is good, and we like that in baseball too. When we get that mixed up, some teams that just absolutely hate each other. We got like some friendly pitching matchups today, which we'll get to a little bit. Remember, guys, if you're not able to watch your favorite Awesemo shows on YouTube, you can always listen. And then you can bring it wherever you want. Check out the Awesemo Podcast Network. There's a podcast for every sport. It's available on every major platform. So go on over to awesemo.com/podcast. You can check out the latest. And if you leave a 5-star review and a nice little rating, you say something nice about my shirt, we all appreciate that. And you leave your Twitter handle, your email address, and you're eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. One winner awarded every Friday, and reviews are eligible to win for up to 1 year. Now, I don't pick the winner, so it won't help you much to compliment my shirt, but my ego needs it sometimes. Also, give us a like, subscribe, keep up with all of our shows here on YouTube. All right. Let's get right into it. And let's go big picture before we hit the first game. A couple things jump out. One, weather shouldn't be a big factor on this night, at least as far as rain goes. Also, the pitching is fun. I mean, I don't know what the heck you're going to do. You got Jacob deGrom against your boy, Corbin Burnes, and Max Scherzer in this mix as well. So there is some big-time pitching on this slate.
Yeah, I mean, we've got kind of not exactly the inverse of yesterday, but there's so many studs to pay up for on this slate, which I think it's really hard to not prioritize them, especially when you consider some of the pricing, particularly on DraftKings, where, $11,800 for deGrom against the Rockies. The only question there really is, is he going to be limited at all in any extent? Corbin Burnes, I'm a known mark for him. Andrew Heaney, he's really cheap as an SP2 on DraftKings. So a lot of ways to go with pitching. And that's actually my preference. I like when there's a lot of good pitching options.
You got to find the right value stack to put with it. So we'll be hunting for that over the course of the show. Also, no Coors Field in the mix. So you got a lot of teams that have the ability to be the top stack on a night like tonight. So let's start with Max Scherzer. He's going up against the Reds. You look at Scherzer versus Burnes versus deGrom. Where does he factor in for you on a night like tonight, where he is one of the big three, but maybe not the hottest pitcher of the group right now?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's where he's kind of priced to me that's maybe a little problematic in terms of lineup builds, because if I'm paying up for a pitcher all the way at the top on DraftKings, I'd much rather go to Jacob deGrom for $1,100 more expensive than Max Scherzer, a much more favorable pitching environment because he's going up against the Rockies. Their offense is absolutely terrible. And then he's also $1,600 more expensive than Corbin Burnes on DraftKings. So Burnes, to me, I really prefer the salary savings he offers. And then I happen to think at this point in their careers, that Corbin Burnes is a better pitcher than Max Scherzer. And then if you go over to Fanduel, we only have to roster one pitcher. And to me, just Jacob deGrom on single pitcher sites makes a lot more sense than Max Scherzer. So it's not to say that Scherzer isn't, a good play in a vacuum if he just existed by himself. I think that he's, more likely than not to have a pretty good fantasy game. I just don't think that he's very likely to have a better fantasy game than Jacob deGrom. And at least per our current ownership projections, it's not like deGrom is going massively higher owned than Max Scherzer. We currently have deGrom project for 41% ownership. Max Scherzer project for 33% ownership. So while there is a little bit more ownership on DraftKings going to deGrom, it's not significant. Then you look at FanDuel, totally even, 24% for deGrom, 24% for Max Scherzer. So with all that being about the same, I view Jacob deGrom as the better play. So I know I didn't really talk about Scherzer himself a whole lot there, except we're just a lot of times we're comparing some of these pitchers and who to roster. it's going to have to be in comparison to the other plays that are on the slate. So Scherzer's probably not going to be a primary option for me just because I prefer getting to Jacob deGrom.
Yeah, that's the decision though, and that's the difference between are the Nationals going to win the game, or who's going to be the best pitcher on a given night? You got to look at it in comparison to the other 12 games on a night like tonight, and all the pitchers that are in the mix there. On the other end, last time we saw Tyler Mahle, he was the chalk on a short slate, and then he got absolutely whacked by the San Francisco Giants. There is some leverage there, I guess, if you want to throw a dart on Mahle. But what do you make of trying to go back to him after, he decimated some teams last weekend?
Yeah, and also he did suffer from a little bit of bad luck in that game, right? He gave up, it was I'm trying to remember, was it the second or third inning? He just gave a bunch of singles in a row. It's not like he was just getting blasted for home run after home run. It was a bunch of singles with and it's not like they weren't hard hit balls. It was just, when balls have like a 38% chance of being a hit and like 4 of them wind up being singles in a row, that works the pitch count up a lot. And also he did start with his command. He'd walked a few guys in that outing. So it was maybe a little bit not representative of how good Tyler Mahle is as a pitcher. And he probably should have performed better than what he did, obviously, where he scored, negative a whole bunch of fantasy points. But still, you look at the price. Yeah, the price point on him today. And by the way, nobody's rostering him, but for good reason. When you look at some of the other options on the slate, even if you want to look at somebody in the same price range, Lucas Giolito is only $100 less expensive on DraftKings. And then FanDuel, with it being a single pitcher site, Mahle is priced down at $7,500, but there's just a bunch of quality pitching options on the slate. It's hard for me to prioritize him on a 1-pitcher slate, and then even on 2-pitcher slates, there's so many studs to pay up for. And then when you have somebody comparable to him in the same price range like Lucas Giolito, that's just going to pass for me on Mahle.
Yeah, the slate matters, as we talked about. Last time he went out, he was the best pitcher on the slate, at least in theory, coming out. And then this time around, kind of a non-factor as far as it looks right now with this matchup against the Washington Nationals. Looking at the YouTube chat, get involved in there. Larry throws out, Spags is so smart. 13-game slate, and he's not doing the show today. I love the big slate. I like the 13 gamers. I like doing Tuesdays and Fridays when we have so much to look at.
Yeah, I don't. But the other thing too is it's also just a product of the schedule. It's not like Spags is ducking this particular slate. He just doesn't do the strategy show on Tuesdays, and also Tuesdays happen to be big baseball slates every time. But
I picked Tuesday because I like the big slate.
Did you actually pick Tuesday?
Yeah, it was originally Tuesday, Friday, and then I'm not doing Friday as much anymore. But like Tuesdays, I like these days because you have so much to look at. I like the madness of it all.
Yeah, I just get up on Mondays and go like, okay, here's my schedule for the week. It's generally about the same as it was last week, but it's not like I have any say in it. I just say, hey, put me on whatever shows you think work best. I do whatever.
Fully available, a producer's dream. Greg Ehrenberg, right there. Give us a like, subscribe, get involved in the YouTube chat as well, and we'll keep that going for you. Make sure you hit that notification button as well. Next up, Corey Kluber coming off his no-hitter against the Texas Rangers. I'll say this. I generally don't like guys coming off no-hitter. I wasn't going to touch Spencer Turnbull last night no matter what, because when you're throwing max effort pitches the 8th and 9th inning, generally your pitch total is going up to a level that it usually does not. You think back to Johan Santana's no-hitter with the Mets, and kind of wasn't the same pitcher after that. But it was kind of easy for Corey Kluber against the Texas Rangers. It's not like he had to overextend himself that much. So much tougher matchup against Toronto. What do you make of Kluber tonight? I guess, he wouldn't be your ace, maybe your second pitcher on DraftKings, or if you really want to throw a dart here.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up his pitch count really quick, but yeah, it wasn't anything really significant, and I think you do bring up a good point. It was something that I had talked about yesterday when it came to Spencer Turnbull, and then also other guys like John Means, who these guys go out and they throw the most pitches they've thrown all season by like a really considerable margin, where you had somebody like Spencer Turnbull. I don't even know if he'd ever thrown over 100 pitches the entire season. Then he throws 117 pitches in his no-hitter. And you start to wonder, what's the carryover effect? Is there going to be any kind of fatigue there? A similar thing happened with John Means. And then his start after his no-hitter, he ended up throwing his 56 pitches before he ended up getting removed from the game. But Corey Kluber, he was really efficient in that game against the Texas Rangers. He actually only finished with 101 pitches. So that actually wasn't even the most pitches that he's had to throw this season. And if you look at his last 4 outings, his pitch count has been 103, 101, 85, and then 101 in the no-hitter. So it wasn't something, outside the norm of what we've seen from him as of late. But really the issue here to me with Corey Kluber, it goes back to what I've talked about with some of the other pitchers on the slate, is Corey Kluber, in part because he just threw the no-hitter, and then also there's a little bit of name value there. Also, he's 8,400 on DraftKings in a really difficult matchup against the Toronto Blue Jays, who have one of the best offenses in baseball. And then you start to say, like, hey, do I want to pay 9,100 for Corbin Burnes? Do I want to pay 8,400 for Corey Kluber? And the answer to me is pretty clearly Corbin Burnes. And then, over on Fanduel, where we have Kluber priced at 8,100, it's a lot of the same sort of situations. Do I want to go and pay for Kluber? Do I want to spend up a little more to get somebody like Jacob deGrom or Corbin Burnes? And to me, it's just going to be really hard to prioritize Kluber. Number one, because I think the last start he had was a little bit of an aberration. His numbers overall for the season are okay, but still his velocity is way down from his peak velocity, 90.4 average miles per hour on the fastball. That's the lowest of his career. He does have a 2.86 ERA, but it's kind of buoyed by a 271 BABIP. So he's a 3.58 expected ERA, of 4.19 xFIP. So everything suggests that Corey Kluber is probably going to regress a little bit. And it's not like he's a super high strikeout guy at this point in his career either. He's a 24.3% strikeout rate. So other guys that I'd prefer to get to than Kluber, not going to be in my player pool. But he's also pitched okay enough to the point where I'm not dying to stack up the Blue Jays against him either.
Yeah. How about the other end of this? Steven Matz, 4.5 ERA at this point. He's going back to New York for the first time, so that'll be the narrative. The New York native played his whole entire career with the Mets until being traded this offseason. And he gets this Yankees offense that is starting to figure it out, or at least has over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and at first glance, first of all, I'm not a Steven Matz guy. I have been fading him and stacking against him for a very long time now. And his numbers this year are actually not terrible. We have a 4.69 ERA. That doesn't look great. But you look at some of the underlying numbers, 3.84 expected ERA. Strikeouts have been solid this year. His control is in check. So I think he's a pretty middle-of-the-road starting pitcher at this point in his career. The real issue I have here with the Yankees in terms of potential stack, though, more than anything, is they are so popular. And for a 13-game slate, when we have the Yankees in, a relatively neutral matchup, picking up 13% ownership as a team, we actually have the Yankees as the second most negatively leveraged team in the top stacks tool. The only team with worse leverage is the Minnesota Twins. So, with that in mind, I think there's lower owned offenses with comparable upside to get to than the Yankees. So still, we haven't found a stack that I like yet as we're going game by game, and the Yankees aren't going to be where I start.
Free content on the site today, Awesemo.com. You got MLB player rankings, NBA ownership rankings, NHL main slate top stacks, PJ golfer projections as well. So when we reference the leverages, top stacks, or some of the best pitcher percentages, pay attention, I guess, write it down, because unless you're locked in and you already have the great Awesemo Plus tools and content, look, it's here for every major DFS sport, weekly pass for $29.95. And then if you just love baseball, you can do baseball on its own for $15.95 every week. Stop guessing, start winning, and join Awesemo Plus today. So let's get to Jacob deGrom. The over-under on this game with the Rockies is at 6. This isn't something I look at every day. Is that the lowest that we've seen this season, to your knowledge, Greg?
I think there was a 5.5 game. Well, also we have to consider some of these 7-inning games. But also I think there's been games where it was two aces going up against each other where it was lower. Certainly deGrom starts we've seen with
you wouldn't think Kyle Freeland would get the over-under line of 6 on his end.
I mean, the Rockies run total for tonight, like if the Rockies run total was 0.5, how confident would you be taking the over on 0.5?
I probably would pound the over on 0.5 just because I've watched too many Mets games over the years.
What if it was 0.5 for the first 6 innings?
Ooh. I probably still wouldn't touch it because I just have to see it from deGrom. And watching his last start, he was clearly laboring. Now, this was 2 weeks ago, but his back was bothering him in the first inning. Then he started to figure it out. And then the 5th inning, he was in clear discomfort. They didn't take him out until he threw some warm-up pitches in the 6th. So I don't really think the Mets have a very firm idea of what they're doing with deGrom, which makes me a little nervous. I guess really it's if he's okay, they're not going to limit him, is my impression. But if he's not okay, then at some point you're going to look at some walks and some things you're not accustomed to seeing from Jacob deGrom.
So this is a spot against the Colorado Rockies, and considering the price point of DeGrom, both FanDuel and DraftKings isn't that outrageous. If I was totally confident in his health, I would actually just be locking him in. I'd be 100% on DeGrom on both sites. That is not the case for me, just because I'm a little concerned of that. Number one, the Mets have been terrible at managing injuries this year. So we had DeGrom, he was banged up. Taijuan Walker, like, he was pitching hurt for a really long time, to the point where they're like, hey, if it hurts to swing, just don't swing. They just have him, striking out, looking in all of his at-bats, even the runners on base. And so they've done some really weird things. And look, I'm no doctor, but this doesn't seem like the optimal way to manage players' health, especially when it comes to Jacob deGrom. I tend to think that he's probably more likely to be healthy than not. He did make that rehab start. There were clips of it online. He was throwing 102 miles per hour, and the poor minor leaguers had no chance of hitting him whatsoever. Pitched 3 innings, struck out 8. One guy got on base, but it was because of a throwing error. But, I mean, the Rockies' offense is so terrible, particularly against right-handed pitching and particularly on the road. So the Colorado Rockies this year, a 68 WRC plus against right-handed pitching. That is the worst in all of baseball. The matchup couldn't be better for deGrom. I'm going to be overweight to him. It's just a matter of not wanting to be 100% just because of some concerns about maybe not totally being 100% healthy. But, I mean, beyond that, I currently have him in 80% of my lineups. I think I'm more likely to end up going over that number than under that number as the day goes on. And I think that he's the best pitching option on the slate. If you're playing single entry, play deGrom in that lineup. If you're playing cash, play deGrom in that lineup. If you're playing 3 entry, play deGrom in all of those lineups. There's only when you're playing 20 plus lineups that I'd say maybe build 1 or 2 without deGrom. Beyond that, he's going to be my most rostered player on the slate. And he honestly might end up scoring over 30 fantasy points, even if the Mets do limit him to, say, 6 innings.
Oh, he could definitely do it in 6. I could see that. And, for deGrom, he's already faced the Rockies once this year. Actually did it at Coors Field, and he struck out, I believe it was 9 batters in a row, and was 1 shy of Tom Seaver's record. So, if you're the Rockies, you've already kind of seen this guy. He's throwing 102 in the minors the other day, so it's not as if he's compromised in terms of velocity or something. But if I'm Trevor Story, this is one of those games where I just start coughing when I show up and just get me out of there. Like John Kruk against Randy Johnson. I don't need any part of that. I'm out.
Yeah, and then you look at deGrom's numbers this year. So last game he left early with an injury. He still ends up scoring 22.85 DraftKings points. That's his lowest total of the season. If you're telling me that the worst case scenario for deGrom is he's somewhat limited and only ends up scoring, 22 fantasy points, honestly, still might be enough to land in the optimal lineup anyway. So the odds of him actually hurting you, it's very, very low.
I'll say in the YouTube chat, Brian gets the game. Nice shirt, PeteyMac. That's the game. That's how you get shout outs. I'm gonna follow. Give me your Twitter. I'll follow right now. That's worth a follow right there. Always get the wardrobe going. That's the key. Braves, Red Sox, Charlie Morton, Garrett Richards. The Braves, they're a big stack. Have one of the top chances of being the top stack tonight against Garrett Richards, who's actually been pretty playable over the course of this season.
Yeah, he's not playable on this slate just because of how many good pitching options there have been. And I've said this about Garrett Richards before. I can't believe he still has a body intact that allows him to even pitch at the big league level, let alone throw 94.3 miles per hour. This is a guy who's had elbow injuries, shoulder injuries. He's tore his ACL fielding and ground ball. So this guy's had everything go wrong for him. He's over 30 now, but still the velocity's there. It's not quite what it was when he was younger. I mean, when he was first coming up, he was a guy who was hitting, 97, 98 with his fastball, but still 94. That's no issue. Look at the numbers from overall for the year: 3.72 ERA, 4.37 expected ERA. The one issue you kind of have with him from a fantasy standpoint is not a whole bunch of strikeouts at this point in his career, 20.7% strikeout rate this year. So you consider all of the pitching options we have on the slate, and he's somebody who's not going to make the cut for me. But at the same time, he's been successful enough that I don't think that there's all that much upside in stacking against him either.
And then Charlie Morton goes for Atlanta. The wind is expected to blow out at Fenway Park. The over-under's up at 9.5. So at least Vegas is expecting there's going to be some runs tonight.
Yeah, and another thing with Charlie Morton is he's been really inconsistent this year. We've seen some starts. And by the way, also, his ERA should be way higher than what it is, because he had that one start where he got, 1 out or maybe 2 outs and gave up 6 runs, but all of them were unearned. So you look at his numbers for the year, and it's the 4.6 ERA, and that number could really stand to be higher. And also you look at the way that Charlie Morton gives up runs when he does get hit, 18.2% home run to fly ball rate this year. So we've got the wind, like you said, that could be a factor tonight. And with the way that Morton's been giving up a lot of home runs this year, it's not that he's a bad pitcher by any means. It's just that he's been inconsistent, and that when he is having his bad outings, he gives up home runs, which is obviously favorable for fantasy. So looking over at the top stacks tool, we have the Boston Red Sox as one of the most under-owned offenses of the night. They actually have the most positive leverage score of the day, almost 3% positive leverage. So the Red Sox, they're a little expensive, but I don't really mind it. I think this is a spot where it really makes sense to get to them as a contrarian option.
The Red Sox seem to often be one of the better teams with leverage over the course of this year. And I guess just because they are so expensive when you start looking at the middle of the order with Martinez and Devers and Bogarts.
Yeah, and I mean, there are still other guys in this lineup that I think are worth getting to. But also, I mean, we have Verdugo is projected for 7% ownership. He's the most popular hitter in the entire lineup, and I still think that he's worth getting, over that 7% number. I do in my initial build. He's only 3,800 on DK, hitting near the top of the order. And then, we've got other guys in there. Christian Vasquez isn't a bad catcher play. He's at 4,200. Bobby Dahlback, he's fairly cheap. He's been a kind of a boom or bust home run option, but I don't mind that for tournaments. He's really cheap. So there's ways you could stack up the Red Sox and make them, viable with some of the top pitchers on the slate. Then also, I'll talk about Andrew Heaney a little bit later. Him as an SP2. You could go DeGrom and Heaney as your two pitchers and kind of stack whatever offense you like because Heaney's so cheap. So with that in mind, I do really like getting to the Red Sox, and I don't find the pricing to be too problematic, especially not when we have JD Martinez projected for 0.1% ownership, Xander Bogaerts 1.7%, Rafael Devers 2%. I don't think the ownership here properly reflects the upside of the Red Sox.
Certainly. And as we'll get to Heaney in a little bit as he takes on the Texas Rangers, but he is definitely the chalk value pick tonight to be pairing with whoever you want at the top, whether it be Burnes, DeGrom, Scherzer, wherever you're going, as if you're doing the two-pitcher lineup on DraftKings. Let's hit Cleveland, Detroit. Detroit, often a team worth targeting with some pitching. Aaron Savali going for Cleveland. Again, we know what the top end of the pitching is going to look like, but if you start looking for that SP2, you want to move off of Heaney. Is Savali someone that you'll look at in this particular spot?
No, not for me. I understand it's a favorable matchup, but still, Savali, he's just too expensive on DraftKings, all the way up at 8,800. Or no, he's 8,800 on Fanduel, but that's still a price where I wouldn't want to go to. And then on DraftKings, Savali is priced at 8,300, which once again, it's a totally different price range than where Andrew Heaney is. Heaney's 6,200 in a favorable matchup against the Texas Rangers. He also has a lot of strikeout upside. Savali doesn't have quite the same strikeout upside. He's $2,000 more expensive at 8,300. So I don't really think it's a comparable trade-off. Like, I'd really be more comparing him to somebody like Corbin Burnes, who's at 9,100, and it's a strong lean to me towards Corbin Burnes. So Savali, once again, it's another pitcher just doesn't quite make the cut because there are so many pitching options on the slate, and I actually think he's a little bit overpriced.
How about Cleveland's offense? They were popular yesterday, and I think for the most part paid off on that.
Yeah, and they are going to be super popular again today, and they do look really negatively leveraged in our top stacks tool. However, the reason that I'm still fine with stacking them is because they have a 17% chance to be the top value stack on the slate, and the team with the second best odds of being the top value stack on the slate are the Texas Rangers, and I don't really like them all that much going up against Andrew Heaney. So we have a 17% chance for the Indians to be the top leverage stack. The Rangers 11.3%. And you think about some of the lineup possibilities that open today by stacking up the Indians, and you see why people are getting to them. And this is also why I like it, because you could stack the Indians for pretty cheap and then pretty comfortably fit Jacob deGrom and Corbin Burnes as your two pitchers. So I do think that it makes a whole bunch of sense to get to the Indians as the team that I'm going to be stacking with pretty high priority, because outside of Jose Ramirez at 5,700, there is not a single other expensive bat in the Indians lineup.
Well, if you see that, Cleveland is as highly owned as the offense appears to be on the way to be, you would think that does mean that a lot of people are looking at this and saying, hey, I'm going to put DeGrom and Burnes together, maybe Scherzer in that mix. Do you then have to separate yourself? Let's say Cleveland does take off and have a big night, and those two guys do what they're supposed to do. Is it then, boy, you better hit on these other three spots, and that becomes the separating factor if there are a lot of people with a similar strategy?
No, I mean, because there's a bunch of secondary stacks you can make with them for really low ownership. Like, let's say the Red Sox, for example. right? You want to pair up the Indians with the Red Sox. The Red Sox guys are all under 1% owned, or at the highest. You got, Verdugo at 7%. Then other guys I mentioned, Devers, 2% owned. So maybe make a 5-man Indian stack. Don't include Jose Ramirez. Throw in Rafael Devers or something like that as the third baseman. And there are ways to make different Indian stacks. The other thing also is some of these guys, while we do have, Ahmed Rosario project for 24% ownership, if you take him out of the stack, the two guys actually were really popular that bring up the overall stack ownership are Ahmed Rosario and Jordan Luplow. So if you make an Indian stack that doesn't include either of those guys, then it becomes much less chalky. We've got guys like Harold Ramirez, 12% ownership, Eddie Rosario, 10% ownership. He's actually the guy who's the highest priority for me overall in Indian stacks right now. So they are popular, except a lot of it's because of the ownership going to those two guys in Ahmed Rosario, 24%, Jordan Luplow at 22%.
And that makes sense. And you talk about the leverage all the time with these offenses. So, if you are going to take a team that is negatively leveraged, and you explained why Cleveland is unique tonight, is that something you often do? Like, maybe I'll just remove this guy who's so highly owned, or throw a thumbs down on the fantasy cruncher at Awesemo.com and do some things to kind of manipulate it a little bit so you can differentiate yourself?
Yeah, I'll do that all the time, especially if there's an offense I really like. And a lot of times we will see that where there's an offense that is projecting for a lot of ownership, but then you look at the individual ownership projections for the players, and it's like, oh, well, one guy's projected for, let's take the Nationals, for example. Yes. Maybe there's a day the Nationals are projected to score a lot of runs.
It just happened this weekend.
Yeah, we'll see them project to score a lot of runs, and you'll see them project for a lot of ownership. But then you look at the individual players and you go, well, wait a second. All these guys are projected for around 8% ownership. However, Trey Turner's project for 35% ownership. Juan Soto's project for 38% ownership. Mm-hmm. And then you say, like, okay, well, I can make a national stack that either doesn't include either of them or only includes one of them. And you have a massively different looking national stack than everybody else. So there are ways to roster a chalky stack that actually isn't chalky if you're taking out the individual players that are making it so popular. And then to your point also with what happened with the Nationals recently, they had that game, they were popular, scored a bunch of runs, and I'm pretty sure Juan Soto didn't reach base in that game.
Yeah, he was 0 for 4, didn't run out of pop-up.
So exactly, it was 0 for 4 with a walk, or maybe 0 for 5 or something like that. But either way, he scored very low amount of fantasy points, and the winning lineup was the National stack just without Juan Soto. So there are ways to make a, quote, chalk stack that actually isn't quite as popular if you just remove the pieces that are really popular.
See, that's why this is the strategy show. See, this is what I like about this, is trying to find the different ways to, try to take down a tournament and find a way to, I guess EV plus would be the way people talk about it. But like, okay, if I'm going to go chalk, especially on a night like tonight where you do have those great pitchers, how do you differentiate a little bit? So that's some cool stuff. This show, the strategy show, it's brought to you by PrizePicks. Now, this is the simplest fantasy game on the market. So you could say goodbye to sharks, lineup optimizers, mass multi-entry. You simply pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players available on the board to either go over or under their projected score. And correctly selecting a 5-player lineup, for instance, can net you up to 10 times your entry fee. From the NFL, NBA, esports, PrizePicks has it all. You can combine your picks across all sports available. So download the mobile app in the App Store or on Google Play today and make your first deposit to receive an instant deposit match of up to $100 when you use promo code Awesemo. Simplify daily fantasy with PrizePicks today. And you can go over on Luka Doncic and then, under on Ronald Acuna Jr. Mix it up.
Or just overs on Jacob deGrom every time he pitches for forever.
And unders on all the Rockies. There you go.
Yeah.
Bada bing, bada boom. So check that out at PrizePicks. Royals, Rays, Brad Keller, Rich Hill. We know the Rays have been absolutely red hot. Was it 11 straight wins now? They were able to get it done in Dunedin this weekend. The long trip home to Tampa Bay as they get Kansas City here. What jumps out to you about this game, this matchup?
So, you look at the Tampa Bay Rays, they have been playing really well recently. Look about appropriately owned, though. We have them with 3.8% chance to be a top stack, 3.7% ownership. Something that stands out to me about the Kansas City Royals is I hate to keep harping on Rich Hill. He's been, he's old and he's pitched a little better than expected as of late, but there's still a little bit of inconsistency there. And if you look at his overall numbers for the year, there are some things that scream regression. The most notable being that Rich Hill this year, he has a 229 BABIP. That's a number that's likely going to regress and come back to the mean a little bit. So that's a reason why Rich Hill does have a 3.89 ERA, which is fine, but he's a 4.31 FIP. He's a 4.16 XFIP. So he's facing a little bit of regression. And then looking at some of the batted ball numbers for Rich Hill, he's a 34.2% hard contact rate. That is way up from what we've seen in recent years. Also, he's getting barreled up a lot more in the last couple of years than we saw from him over his peak year. So last couple of years, 9.3% power rate against Rich Hill last year, 9% this year. Whereas you look at some of the other years where Rich Hill was at his peak, like 2016, 2.2% power rate, 2015, 4.8% power rate. So we're seeing about 2 times as often that guys are making really solid contact against Rich Hill. And while the Kansas City Royals don't have the best offense in the world, this is another team that we have with pretty good odds of being a top value stack on the slate. So 7.7% chance for the Kansas City Royals to end up being the top value. That is the third best odds behind the Cleveland Indians, the Texas Rangers. Just given the low ownership on the Texas Rangers, I think it makes sense as a team to target. This is another team that we can get to that allows us to combine Jacob deGrom, Corbin Burnes, maybe Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, that kind of combination of pitchers. So you get to 2 aces, and then you also have an offense with a little bit of upside.
It's not a great ballpark, obviously, there in St. Pete, hit home runs, but Kansas City does have some right-handed power from Merrifield, Sal Perez, Jorge Soler, even Carlos Santana is a switch hitter. So you do have some pop from the right-hand side to target Hill with.
Yeah, and then, I mean, more importantly, also the pricing is good here, and the hitters are all pretty low owned. So like Jorge Soler always has home run upside, 3,100, 4% ownership. Like that to me looks like a pretty solid play. And then some of the other guys in the lineup, even if you want to just take a chance on them as one-offs, Whit Merrifield, 0.7% projected ownership. We have Carlos Santana, 2% projected ownership. Michael Taylor, a guy with a little bit of power and speed upside. He's somebody who's scored double-digit fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. He's projected for 0.1% ownership. So this is a stack that I think is massively contrarian. They're cheap. They let me get to the pitchers I like. So this is a spot that I like against Rich Hill, who 41 years old now, seems likely to be facing at least a little bit of regression. And also the velocity is down pretty far for him now.
So it's, as we mentioned, big slate tonight, and we're just getting out of the 7-10 games. It's an early slate, too. There's a lot of early games tonight. So by, 7:30, 8 o'clock, you probably have a pretty good idea of where you're standing here. But let's hit Baltimore and Minnesota. The Twins, very popular tonight as people looking to target Dean Kramer of the Baltimore Orioles and Jose Berrios making the start for the Twins. The over-under nearly double digits here at 9.5 on what should be some positive hitting weather in Minnesota.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't know what happened with the audio or something, but people apparently something was glitching. So I'd like to. Does anybody know what was going on there? No? It
all sounded perfect to me.
Yeah, I mean it sounded fine over Zoom, but I'm trying to look through the chat here. But yeah, apparently people were really excited about it, whatever it was.
Well, it tripped balls for 2 minutes, so that's what we're getting.
Damn. All right, I'm gonna listen back to it. So that would be that'll be fun. But all right, yeah. Tyler said that he was freaking out about. I didn't realize that Tyler was freaking out. I'm just sitting here talking about baseball. So whatever happened, I'm excited to go back and rewatch whatever the. So let's see, we're about the 11:30 mark, so halfway through the show.
It better live up to the description.
Yeah, hey, I'm bookmarking it in my head halfway through. And was it only my end? Was it on Pete's end also? Do we know? Nobody knows. Whatever. I'm excited to listen back to it now. I never like to listen back to any of the shows I'm on because I who likes themselves. But yeah, this is going to be exciting. What game were we on again? I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. Where are we at? Baltimore, Minnesota. Not the most exciting game on this slate. So we can rip through this one quick. Get to Burnes.
Yeah. All right. So you said Minnesota, Baltimore, right?
Yeah, Minnesota, Baltimore. I know Minnesota is very popular tonight to try to target Dean Kramer, get the big numbers going.
Yeah, so people are going to be really high on Minnesota today in a massive way. And I mean, if you just look at the numbers, Dean Kramer's no good. Minnesota Twins have a really good offense. But the issue here is going to be the ownership going to them. This is the most popular team on the slate by a mile. And I saw people in the chat earlier wanting to target the Minnesota Twins. Fine, I get it. That's what a lot of the field is doing. For me personally, on a slate that's 13 games where one team is picking up 23% ownership for the Twins on Fanduel and 18% on DraftKings, it's just not appropriate numbers. So the Minnesota Twins, 23% ownership on FanDuel, but a 9% chance to be the top stack of the day. And then we're looking at, 18% ownership, and then obviously same odds being top stack on DraftKings. So all I consider, this is also a pretty expensive team that makes it hard for me to pay up for the pitchers I really like to. This is a spot that's going to make or break me today. I'd rather be off the Twins and go to teams that have not necessarily comparable chance of being a top stack, because we do have the Twins still with overall the best chance of being a top stack on the slate. But give me a team like, say, Boston, we talked about before. The Red Sox have a 5% chance of being a top stack on the slate and 1.8% projected ownership, whereas the Twins, 9% chance of being a top stack and around 20% ownership. So give me the ownership discount on the Red Sox, because I don't think that the ownership on Twins really appropriately shows their odds of being the top scoring team of the day.
Nothing like letting it ride on Dean Kramer. But yeah, so that's what you got to do sometimes. You cover as many possibilities as you can on a 13-game slate, and some you can't necessarily get to, or you don't want to get to, because everybody else is looking at it. So we got some more details on the audio. Apparently, and this might have happened naturally. There was just a pause for a minute, and then you started talking 10,000 words per minute. Ooh. Which is something you're probably capable of. You're like the guy at the end of the insurance commercial, just ripping out everything that's not true about it as quickly as possible.
I wonder if we could have you seen that new app that somebody made where it's like a robot, but it has all of these celebrity voices uploaded into it. So you could make them say whatever you want, and you can make them rap and stuff like that. But yeah, people have had some pretty funny things they posted from like Kanye West or like Jay-Z just rapping about, things they wouldn't normally say, but it's very, very funny.
Technology's come a long way from when I was in college, and you had the Arnold Schwarzenegger soundboard, and that was the most hilarious thing ever, that you could just, hit a button and then it would play his line from a movie. Now you can actually manipulate what people say. People can't tell. That's great. Don't do it to me, please.
I like how you think you're famous enough that you would be on that thing. Like we're not.
I'm on Awesemo.
It's
once a week.
It's the choices. It's not like the choices are Jay-Z, Kanye West, and PeteyMac. Like those aren't the names that they programmed. I'm
glad. It's good. I like my words to be mine, not somebody else's. Corbin Burnes, nobody's doing it to him either, I guess. But Joe Musgrove is his opponent, the San Diego Padres. Look, we know the Padres, they have some offense, they have some ability to get things done, but it's Corbin freaking Burnes. It doesn't so much matter what the matchup is, especially when you look at his price, particularly on DraftKings tonight.
Yeah, he's a little more expensive on FanDuel. The DraftKings price is just too cheap when you consider how well he's pitched this year. It's funny, when you look at the 1.79 ERA, it should probably be even lower. He has a 1.79 ERA, but a 1.29 expected ERA, a 0.84 FIP. He never walks guys. He strikes out everybody. So for the year, a 44.7% strikeout rate and a 1.3% walk rate. He's been outrageous. Yeah. He's been just outrageously good. The only thing that doesn't make him the front runner for Cy Young is because he's in the same bracket as Jacob deGrom, who's even more ridiculous. But beyond that, Corbin Burnes, he's the 1B to what Jacob deGrom's 1A has been this year. His velocity has gone up a little bit this year. He's now throwing about 97 miles per hour is his average fastball velocity. Corbin Burnes is nearly unhittable. To me, I don't care that it's a tough matchup for him tonight. I don't think that anybody's really capable of hitting the kind of stuff he has. So unless something happens where he just totally starts to lose command of his fastball, which we've seen from in the past, but to this point, that seems in check. He doesn't walk anybody. So Corbin Burnes is my second favorite overall play on the slate behind Jacob deGrom. So
give me an idea. So it sounded like you had deGrom in about 80% of your lineups. And if I'm going to sit here and guess, I know you love Corbin Burnes. Is it like 50% Burnes and you're pairing them together quite a bit? How far into Burnes are you?
It's 49% right now. I don't know what that number.
Boom.
I don't know what the number is going to be later, but yeah right now, a lot of my lineups are Jacob deGrom or Corbin Burnes, and I doubt I'm going to have any lineups that don't have at least one of them.
So that's what you're looking at here. And it's a big three. Max Scherzer is in that mix, but as we talked about earlier in the show, not as great a spot for him as you have for Burnes and deGrom. And Burnes and deGrom are just better than Max Scherzer right now, as we talked about a little bit as well. How about the other side of this? Again, a guy like Joe Musgrove probably gets lost on this slate. Should he?
So he's in my player pool right now, but there's just the issue of I don't have that many lineups with him in the initial build I made because there's just so many other guys to get to. And I mean, if we look at his odds to be the top pitcher of the slate in our top pitchers tool, with 16% chance being a top pitcher, which is, it's fine and good, but we still have Corbin Burnes, Max Scherzer, and Jacob deGrom all ahead of him. It is a positive matchup against Milwaukee Brewers, whose offense has struggled this year, but they do have Christian Yelich back now. I'm not totally sure that Christian Yelich is totally healthy because, we've seen him get days off since coming back. We've also seen him DH. So Christian Yelich, maybe not 100%, but I do think that makes that offense at least not totally terrible as it was before. So Joe Musgrove, I think he's worth a small amount of exposure to, but it's really hard for me to prioritize him when I'd much rather get to deGrom and Corbin Burnes and then Scherzer to a lesser extent.
Well, look, if you hit on Burnes, on deGrom tonight, tell us all about it. Get yourself in the Awesemo Hall of Fame. Check out the Twitter account at Awesemo HOF. And this is something you can do. Download the Awesemo avatar at awesemo.com/avatar. Put it up on wherever you play your daily fantasy. And if you place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants, tweet the win to the account and you get a free month. Not a week, free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So that's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, and by the way, I just got the clip sent to me by other producer Jordan Klein. He cut it and has already texted it to me, so I'm very excited to listen to my fast talking.
We got a minute. No, we actually don't have a minute because we got 5 games to go. But yeah, it's a big slate. We'll get to it later. Dodgers-Astros, old friends, Clayton Kershaw, Zach Greinke, and then old not so friends with it being a rematch, this 2017 World Series and all the ill will that has been there between these two teams. I believe this is the second time they're facing each other this year. So we went through all this once. Yeah, it's kind of odd for Clayton Kershaw to be on a slate. And again, he's kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, I don't have any lineups with Kershaw in them right now. I mean, I understand he's 8,000. That's a favorable price tag, but generally look at his pitch count this year. He has one start against the Marlins where he was allowed to throw over 105 pitches. But you look at his other starts this year, especially recent ones, 83 pitches his last time out. Then he had the start where he had 105 against the Marlins. But before that, 71 pitches against the Angels, just 39 against the Cubs. Then 90, 91. So in general, his upside is a little bit capped just because the Dodgers more often than not aren't allowing him to work deep into games. Then you also consider the situation he's in, going on the road, pitching in the American League, facing a very dangerous Astros lineup. I understand the price is down for Clayton Kershaw, but I don't feel comfortable with him. I don't think he's somebody I'm going to get to, or if I do, it's only going to be a handful of lineups.
Are you still targeting Zach Greinke? He's throwing 50-mile-per-hour curveballs and all this kind of funky stuff. For the most part, though, it's been working for him.
So Greinke is somebody who I actually have targeted against a little bit this year, just because I do think he's somebody who is on the downside of his career. I think he's heading for a lot of regression, and I don't think he's going to be a great pitcher going forward. But the field is on the Dodgers in this spot already. The Dodgers picking about 8% ownership as a stack. So Greinke's numbers this year, they're not great. They're not terrible either. 3.77 ERA, 3.53 expected ERA. A lot of concern about the strikeout rate and how quickly it's diminishing along with his velocity, 19.9% strikeout rate. This is the lowest that he's had since back when Zach Greinke wasn't really a good pitcher. So definitely there's a notable dip in overall arm talent. Also a guy who doesn't throw quite 90 miles per hour even anymore. Average fastball velocity is down to 89 miles per hour, but it's really a situation where I would want to be on them if the Dodgers weren't picking up ownership. It was something who actually, whenever I see Zach Greinke on a slate, I think like, oh, that's probably a good contrarian spot to target. But not when we have the Dodgers picking up 7.3% ownership as a team. The field's kind of already there.
Yeah, it seems that people have figured out that Greinke, he has the ability for those 50-mile-per-hour ephus pitches or whatever to start being hit a long way at some point, even if it hasn't happened yet for him this year for the Houston Astros. Stay up to date on the latest MLB DFS news. Check out our @Awesemo MLB handle. Our guy News God delivers the starting lineup confirmations, which are always big. And then injury updates. Somebody gets scratched late. You want to know all about that. So at Awesemo MLB. And you can check out News God's Twitter handle as well, at newsgod_DFS. A high school rotation battle of sorts. I feel like everybody knows this by now, but Jack Flaherty, Lucas Giolito, high school teammates at Harvard Westlake, along with Max Fried. Is that like an old story now that just everybody locks in and knows about?
I don't think
hit
so.
That point? No, it's not cliche yet? Okay.
No, I think that it's also because, like, how often are they facing each other? I think that's one of the, if they were in the same division, I think it'd get brought up, ad nauseum, but not quite as much with them playing in opposite conferences. And then also, I kind of feel these storylines don't get as much publicity in baseball as they do in other sports. Like NBA, like every time the Knicks play the Pelicans, like we're always going to hear about like, oh, RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson, they went to college together. This, I think, probably less so.
Yeah, well, baseball, nobody's watching high school baseball. Yeah,
or even talking about it for the most part. I like Giolito a little bit as a contrarian option at 8,700 as an SP2 on DraftKings. Fanduel, I think there's less reason to get to him just because it's the single pitcher slate situation. And also Joe Musgrove at 8,400 on Fanduel, to me, is a better option than the 8,500 Giolito. So with that in mind, Giolito, a little bit of interest as an SP2 option. Jack Flaherty is really expensive today, considering the matchup. 9,300 on DraftKings, pitching on the road in Chicago. That's a tough spot. And then you go look at him on FanDuel, where Jack Flaherty's priced all the way up to 10,500. So to me, Flaherty too expensive to roster. He's good enough to where I don't want to stack the White Sox against him. But there's too many good pitchers in that same price range for me to get to Flaherty.
Well, we know Andrew Heaney, he is kind of the chalk as far as the value picks go tonight as we jump to the Angels hosting the Texas Rangers. He's got an ERA of around 5.5, and yet the field is absolutely all over this guy. The strikeout numbers have been pretty good. He's got a positive matchup against the Texas Rangers. Have already been no-hit twice this season. Are you as bullish on Heaney as the field is?
Yeah, if you look at the Texas Rangers numbers this year, they do have a 25.1% strikeout rate against left-handed pitching. They also had 91 WRC+, so very favorable matchup. Then you look at the underlying numbers for Heaney, and he's just been unlucky this year. The biggest thing has been sequencing. He's a 67% strand rate. That's something that's going to regress a little bit. So the 5.31 ERA, you look at the 4.17 expected ERA, 4.25 FIP. He's going to see some positive regression come his way. And then you also consider the really high strikeout rate for him, a 30.5% K rate. That's really good looking, especially against a team that strikes out a whole bunch against left-handed pitching. So I think there's a whole bunch of upside in Andrew Heaney. He isn't priced appropriately on DraftKings for the matchup. All that comes together, and he's somebody who, if you're looking to save money for an SP2 and go cheap, I think Heaney's the top option.
And it very much seems that way. Clearly, he's the top value percentage by a long way. If you're able to check out the top pitchers on Awesemo, that feature is not free today, but that's why you want to get on Awesemo Plus, get all that info. What is free today on the website, the MLB Big Board, as far as other sports, PGA ownership, NHL player and stack rankings, and MLB ownership rankings are free today as well. Seattle, Oakland, Logan Gilbert, big prospect, hasn't been Jared Kelenic so far. A couple of disappointing outings there. The field probably drops off of him a little bit. And going up against Cole Irvin, who's been a nice surprise to some degree for Oakland.
Yeah, so starting with the Logan Gilbert side of this game, he did come into the year as the 35th overall ranked prospect in baseball by Fangraphs. I think that's notable. Just kind of look at some of the acumen of these guys. It is hard to know what his minor league success has looked like, just because we've brought this up before, but there's no minor league numbers from last year. So who knows how he was pitching last year. But in previous years, there was pretty favorable looking minor league numbers for Logan Gilbert. He's giving up a whole bunch of hard contact this year, giving up a whole bunch of home runs and a lot of fly balls. So there's a lot of alarming numbers here. Only a 13% ground ball rate, combined with a 16.7% home run to fly ball rate. That's an issue. And Logan Gilbert, if you look at his ZiPS projection for the rest of the year, he's projected for a 4.75 ERA. It doesn't mean he can't be a good pitcher in the future, but from what we've seen from him to this point, it doesn't look like he's quite been able to put it together. So I like going to the Oakland A's against him, a team that's only picking up 3.2% ownership as a stack right now. given the struggles of Logan Gilbert overall, and then also the way that he's giving up his runs, a lot of fly balls, a lot of home runs. So that's going to likely mean a lot of extra base hits against him whenever it is that he's not pitching well. I think Oakland's a team to target.
And you're not getting a whole lot of innings out of Gilbert, even if he is good. I think maybe we shouldn't say that because we just haven't seen him be good and effective and how far they would be willing to go. But my wager would be the way that teams handle young pitchers, he's not likely to be hitting 100 pitches anytime soon.
Yeah, probably not.
So you're getting a lot of the Mariners bullpen would be my point if you're going A's.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing, too, is, who really knows if he's actually on some sort of tight pitch restriction, as much as he's been so terrible that there's been no reason to leave him in for longer stretches. But yeah, it's a bad bullpen behind him. To this point, it doesn't look like he's quite major league ready. So Oakland, it's a priority team for me to stack.
And it looks like Brian in the chat, he's all over Kevin Gausman in our final game of this slate as he goes up against Corbin Martin, Giants, Diamondbacks. And boy, it's just amazing. The Giants have been able to get the kind of pitching that they have. And Kevin Gausman all of a sudden is unbeaten in late May and sitting there with a ERA right around 1.5. I mean, this isn't, Matt Cain, Madison Bumgarner, Tim Lincecum, but the Giants are getting it done with some of these veterans.
Yeah, and you look at some of the splits on the price of Kevin Gausman, Fanduel versus DraftKings. He's not priced appropriately on either site. So DraftKings has gone ahead and priced Kevin Gausman, like you just said, at 7,200. Whereas compared to Fanduel, they have priced Gausman up to, 10,800. So Kevin Gausman is $600 more expensive than Corbin Burnes on Fanduel. Way, way too expensive to play on Fanduel. But then on DraftKings, he's way too cheap at 7,200. So he's going to be a pretty popular play. The question just becomes, what are some of the opportunity costs of rostering him? Maybe I would rather get to Andrew Heaney than Kevin Gausman. But as of right now, let's say if you're playing 20 lineups and somebody's asking me, what should your player pool be at pitcher? I would say probably DeGrom, Corbin Burnes, Andrew Heaney, and Kevin Gausman. Those should be the 4 priority plays at pitcher. I do prefer Heaney to Gausman just because of the $1,000 savings in salary. But still, I think Gausman's definitely somebody to roster. Just the price is wrong on DraftKings.
And they're just off. And, on the other side, Corbin Martin, he's very cheap. He's one of the better value plays, if you were, though, again, there's a big gap between Andrew Heaney and then Corbin Martin is at least in the top 3. Is there anything you like about that matchup going up against San Francisco? And the Giants offense has been better than I think a lot of people thought. I don't think many people had Brandon Crawford among the home run leaders in the National League at this point.
Yeah, actually, I like the Giants as a stack a lot in this spot. We have them with the second best odds of being the top stack on the slate, and also ownership that's slightly too low, about fair, except still a little bit lower than what it should be. So the Giants, I think, are a team to get to. Corbin Martin, there's really, really limited information on him. He's pitched a total of 5 innings this year. In the minor leagues, he's pitched 9 innings. And then you look at his numbers from 2019 with the Astros. Last time we saw him in the big leagues, he did not find much success. He pitched, once again, small sample size. It was only 19 innings, but he had a 5.59 ERA and a 5.82 expected ERA in those starts. So overall, from what we've seen him at the big league level, we have a total of 24 big league innings where he has an expected ERA over 5. He also has an actual ERA of 5.55, and he has a wins above replacement of negative. He's been pitching at a below replacement level. So that considered, then also, like you said, the Giants offense has been better than expected. Also, that ballpark is playing more favorable to hitters than we've expected from the past ever since the walls were moved in. I think that this is overall, it's a Giants team that we're going to want to stack today. Corbin Martin does not look like a good pitcher.
I think this is a fun slate. It's big. You got 13 games to try to wrap your head around, 26 pitchers. But after going through the show with you a little bit, the pitchers kind of simplify a little bit. And really, it's going to be mixing and matching the stacks and trying to hit the right one. That'll be challenging. That'll be where you spend your afternoon trying to find. But pitching wise, when you have so many of these top aces, it does simplify things a little bit. So we think.
Yeah, I always like just being able to get the security where you pay up for guys like Jacob deGrom, Corbin Burnes, because, a bad start for Jacob deGrom is usually like 22 fantasy points. A bad start for Corbin Burnes is, like 20 fantasy points because of all the strikeout upside. So you really are able to lock in a whole bunch of security by paying for those guys.
To go big on them, and then figure it out elsewhere as far as what else you have. You don't have like major weather concerns tonight, so it's not something where we'll all be checking radar at 6:59. And there's no Coors Field. I hate Coors Field. I don't like the slates where they're in the mix, where they're at home.
Level it, burn it down.
Ooh, that's not a bad idea. I guess is Oakland another ballpark that probably will happen soon? That'll be a sad day.
Yeah, well, they moved to, where are they going to move to? Seattle, San Jose?
Send them in my backyard. Put them in Charlotte, baby.
Let's see. I want to pull up. Do we want to end the show now, or should I pull up the clip of me talking fast?
Oh, we got a minute. Let's go. Let's do it.
All right. Let's see.
I want to hear just how fast you can go. Oh yeah, definitely like the end of the insurance commercial.
Yeah, that is what it sounds like. Here, these are like, hey, if it lasts for more than 4 hours, this is the side effect.
Yes, it's the side effect list just fired off as quickly as possible. That's pretty good. Maybe you could be an auctioneer with that kind of ability. You know what people do that I can't wrap my head around is listen to podcasts at like 1.5 or 2 times speed. I don't know how you could register anything that's being said when it's coming at you rapid fire like that.
Yeah, well, that's more than 1.5 speed. That's like a 1,000x speed. Yeah, but people don't know that's how fast I process information in my head, which is also why, listen, we're gonna have to end the show. Number one, I need to get my oil changed, and I need to plug. I need to plug myself in. I need to recharge the batteries.
Okay, all right. So Greg needs to be recharged. So we'll allow that happen so he can go across in the room of the floor in his apartment before putting all the stats together and putting together the lineups in a big night. Not just baseball. Of course, you've got NBA playoffs, 3 games tonight as well. We have NBA shows coming up on the Awesemo channel. The tip-off at 4:30. Deep dives into the NBA at 5:30. The PGA Strategy Show is coming your way in an hour. So be sure to check out all of that as well. Our thanks to our sponsor, PrizePicks. Greg Ehrenberg, terrific job. Robo Greg getting it done. Our producer, Tyler. I'm PeteyMac. Happy stacking.